Harlow, Nebraska, was the kind of town that didn't show up on maps unless you were really zoomed in. A dusty dot tucked inside the quiet flatness of the Midwest, swallowed by oceans of cornfields that stretched farther than the eye could see. Harlow didn't get visitors. Harlow didn't make headlines. It was the place people drove through without remembering they'd passed it. But in the fall of 1996, that changed. It began like a whisper, soft, barely noticeable. The kind of thing you could ignore if you wanted to. And people did. At first. Then Clara Wills disappeared. Clara was 19 and working late shifts at Benny's Diner, the only place in town where you could still get a decent slice of cherry pie and a coffee that didn't taste like burnt rubber. Locals knew her. She was kind, sharp-witted, and had dreams bigger than Harlow's city limits. She talked often about saving up and moving to Chicago or maybe Denver. Somewhere with lights that didn't flicker and sidewalks that didn't crack beneath your feet. On September 6th, Clara clocked out at 10:06 p.m. sharp. The last person to see her was Benny himself, wiping down a table by the window. She waved goodbye, said, "See you Monday," and walked into the night. She never made it home. Her car was found the next morning on Route 41, just a mile out of town. Doors locked. Headlights off. Purse still on the passenger seat. Keys dangling from the ignition. And sitting neatly in the center of the driver's seat, a single, pristine ear of corn. It wasn't just strange. It was chilling. Sheriff Boone, a man more used to chasing down stray dogs than leading missing persons cases, tried to play it off. Maybe she ran off. Maybe she got lost. Maybe she had a breakdown. But even he didn't believe that. Clara's family swore she wouldn't just vanish. Her room was untouched, paycheck uncashed, suitcase gathering dust under the bed. The cornfields were the first place people looked. Volunteers and deputies trudged through the stalks, voices echoing her name, boots sinking into the soft, muddy ground. Drones didn't exist back then. There were no infrared cameras or search algorithms. Just people with flashlights, thermoses of lukewarm coffee, and the kind of hope that starts to feel like denial the longer it lingers. They found nothing. No blood. No torn clothes. No signs of struggle. Just the rustling of dry stalks in the September wind and the growing sense that something was watching from the deep green rows. 2 weeks passed. The town held vigils, printed flyers, whispered prayers. Then it happened again. Madeline Kearns. 21. A nursing student home for the semester. Vanished after a jog near her family's farm. Her shoes were found on the dirt road leading into the western fields. And on the seat of her car, parked at the edge of her driveway, an ear of corn, freshly plucked. Panic took root. Parents stopped letting their daughters walk alone. High school football games were canceled. Locks were double-checked. Gun sales quietly spiked at the bait shop. But Harlow didn't have the resources of a big city. They had one sheriff, 2 deputies, and a whole lot of farmland. And then there was the third. Jessica Mallory, 20. Last seen leaving the library at 8:13 p.m. Her bike was ditched behind the building. Another corn ear, this time left on the library steps, as if mocking them. That's when the whispers began to rise. Not just murmurs of fear, but full-blown theories. Everyone had one. Some said it was a serial killer, someone local, someone hiding in plain sight. Others claimed it was something worse. Something not human. A few whispered the word cult with that quiet, terrified reverence reserved for things that were half believed, half dreaded. But whatever it was choosing. Always women. Always alone. Always between 8 and 10 p.m. And always the corn. It became more than a signature. It was a message. No one knew what it meant, but they all felt it. Harlow was no longer safe. Something had cracked beneath its quiet, slow-moving surface. The ground itself felt different. The air, thicker. As if the fields were breathing, listening, waiting. The local paper tried to keep things calm. Sheriff Boone gave tired statements, tried to downplay the pattern, but by October, nobody was buying it. A local pastor stood on his front lawn one morning shouting about fire and brimstone and things that walk in stalks of maize. He was committed the next day to a hospital 2 counties over. The cornfields, once a symbol of life, of harvest, of the American Midwest, became something else entirely. People stopped walking their dogs near them. Children were warned not to wander past the hedgerows. And if you listened close enough at night, you could swear the wind carried something with it. A hum. A whisper. A breath. It didn't help that strange things started happening, too. Cattle mutilations. Radios turning to static at the same exact time. 2:13 a.m. screeching noises in the distance that no one could trace. Entire patches of corn, found flattened in spiraling, unnatural shapes. Cell reception cut out near the fields, even though there were towers just a few miles out. And every week, without fail, another ear of corn would appear somewhere. On the church steps. Inside the post office drop-box. Balanced on the hood of the mayor's car. No new disappearances. Just these, reminders. Like whoever, or whatever, was doing it, was keeping score. Sheriff Boone organized town hall meetings, which quickly devolved into shouting matches and tearful accusations. Curfews were enforced. Roadblocks were set up. Hunters volunteered to patrol the fields in shifts, but nothing ever turned up. Then came the letter. Typed. No return address. No fingerprints. Just one sentence. The field remembers. That same night, a fire broke out on the north side of town. An entire barn reduced to ash. The only thing left untouched was a small section of the nearby corn, blackened on the outside but still standing. Still watching. By late October, Harlow was a ghost town. Businesses shuttered early. Church pews sat empty. School was suspended. Reporters came and went, some laughed, some didn't. But none stayed long. Not after they saw the fields. Not after they felt that cold in the air that didn't match the season. Not after they realized the stories were more than just stories. There's a kind of fear that doesn't scream. That doesn't run. That doesn't even breathe. It just sits with you, in your bones, in the back of your skull, in the silence between crickets. That's the kind of fear that had Harlow by the throat. No one could say exactly when the town stopped pretending. Maybe it was when the Wills family moved away in the dead of night, leaving behind furniture and photos. Maybe it was when Father Elliot smashed his own stained glass windows, claiming they were watching him. Or maybe it was when the power grid failed for 6 straight hours, and every house within 5 miles of Route 41 lost electricity at the same time. Every house except the one nearest the fields. That house? Abandoned since '87. And yet when they checked it the next day, the lights were on. Still humming. But no one was home. By November, the air had changed again. The cold came early that year, and with it came the crows. Thousands of them. Swarming above the corn like smoke. The townsfolk called it an omen. They weren't wrong. One morning, Benny, yes, the same Benny who last saw Clara, walked into his diner and found an ear of corn waiting on the counter, next to the register. That was the last day Benny opened his doors. Eventually, the FBI got involved. Sent a team out. They interviewed, they documented, they left. No statements. No follow-ups. It was as if they didn't want anything to do with Harlow once they saw what was really going on. And yet the town kept going. Or at least tried. Some folks stayed because they had nowhere else to go. Others stayed because leaving felt worse. Like running would only make it angrier. Like leaving would only make you easier to find. There was a theory among the teenagers, a local legend now. They said the corn wasn't just a crop. It was a boundary. A veil. A living thing. And sometimes, it demanded payment. 3 girls in one harvest season. That was the price. Or maybe the warning. Because just as suddenly as it began, the disappearances stopped. No more girls vanished. No more ears of corn appeared in strange places. But the fear? It stayed. And the fields? They never stopped whispering. The call came in just after dawn. Emily Carver, 22. A local girl. Soft-spoken. Volunteer EMT. Known for bringing extra pie to elderly regulars at Benny's Diner. The kind of girl who wrote thank you notes for holiday gifts and always tipped extra on to-go orders. Her body was found 3 miles outside Harlow, in the northern quadrant of the cornfields. A hunter's retriever, off-leash, had gone missing. When the man followed the barking, he saw a patch of soil that didn't look quite right. Fresh. Disrupted. Wrong. What they uncovered stopped Harlow's collective heartbeat. Emily had been buried shallowly, just beneath the topsoil. Corn stalks had been dug up, then replanted over her like someone was trying to sew her back into the land. But it wasn't just the burial. It was the way her body had been left. Hands severed clean at the wrists. Eyes gouged out. Mouth crudely sewn shut with fishing line. A ritual. Or a message. Or both. That was the moment the case left the hands of Sheriff Boone, and entered the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And with it came Special Agent Mara Lark. She arrived alone. No convoy. No suit. Just a battered government sedan and an expression that didn't flinch. Lark was lean, sharp-eyed, early 40s, and carried herself like someone who'd long ago stopped needing to prove anything. A woman who'd seen too much already, and knew there was always more waiting. She shook Boone's hand. Briefly. Politely. Then got to work. Within hours, she had the files spread out in a room above the library. Clara. Madeline. Jessica. Now Emily. For missing, 1 confirmed dead. And in each case, some form of corn left behind. She listened to the tapes, read the witness statements, reviewed the terrain. And what she saw disturbed her more than she let on. Lark had investigated cults before. Ritual killers. Even rural communities with dark secrets buried under generations of silence. But this was different. More methodical. More rooted. Like the violence wasn't just being done in the corn, it was coming from it. But what caught her attention wasn't the grotesque detail of the murder. It was something simpler. All 4 girls had worked at Benny's Diner. That wasn't in the official reports. Boone had noted their jobs, sure. But he hadn't connected the timeline. Lark did. Clara. Madeline. Jessica. Emily. All of them had clocked shifts in the days before their disappearance. All of them had served on the same night. All had waited the same section. Table 6. She pulled the old diner rosters, handwritten and yellowing. Found the logs. Highlighted the names. Same pattern every time, last night alive, always assigned to table 6. She requested the diner's security footage, what little there was. Grainy. Black and white. Only 2 cameras, one over the register, the other near the kitchen door. But it was enough. In each case, she found him. A man. Alone. Sitting at table 6. Same table, same seat, always late at night. Face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. No talking. No orders made aloud. He'd simply point to the menu. Paid in cash. Tips generous. Always left just before the end of the shift. And always disappeared into the night like smoke. Lark ran his frame through FBI facial recognition. Nothing. No match. No prints. No trace. A ghost. She drove out to the fields herself. Refused escort. Said she needed to feel the terrain. Local deputies watched her vanish into the stalks and didn't follow. Not out of disobedience, but fear. No one walked those fields anymore. Not even in daylight. Lark walked for hours. Then she saw it. A grain silo, rusting at the edge of the north fields. The kind of place that should have collapsed decades ago. Padlocked tight. Windows blacked out. A chained gate around it, half swallowed by weeds. Most people wouldn't notice it. Would assume it was condemned. Lark didn't assume anything. She circled it twice. Counted the locks. Noted the shovel marks. Someone had been here recently. That night, under cover of darkness, she returned with bolt cutters and a flashlight. The air inside was dead. Cold. Stagnant. Dust floated like skin in the beam of her light. The scent of dried earth and something older, rotting wood, copper, mildew. And something else. Something sweet and putrid. She stepped carefully, boots crunching on what she thought was gravel, until she looked down. Teeth. Dozens of them. Scattered like seeds. She didn't flinch. The walls were plastered in old newspaper clippings, missing girls, obscure local headlines, faded printouts of the town's layout. Red string connected some. Corn husks were woven and nailed in strange geometric shapes. More than decoration. Symbols. Ritualistic. Almost, language. And then she saw the altar. At the center of the silo, lit only by a shaft of moonlight from a broken roof panel, stood a crude table made of barnwood. Surrounding it, corn dolls, some small as fingers, some the size of toddlers. All made from husks, string, bones, human hair. And Polaroids. At least 20. All of them of the missing girls. Not just Clara, Madeline, Jessica, and Emily, others. Girls who had never even been reported missing. Faces she didn't recognize. All gagged. Bound. Eyes wide with fear. And on the far wall, pinned with a butcher knife, was a calendar. Old. Torn. But recent enough to show this month. And there, circled in red marker, July 20th. 5 days from now. Below the date, scribbled in what Lark hoped was red ink, were 3 words. Final harvest begins. She snapped photos. Bagged what she could. Didn't sleep that night. When she showed Boone the evidence the next morning, his face drained of color. He asked her if she was certain, if it wasn't some sick prank. Lark said nothing. Just dropped the Polaroids onto his desk. Boone vomited in the trash can. The town was on edge again. Lockdowns. Prayers. Hushed conversations in church basements and behind closed doors. But none of them knew what Lark knew. That this wasn't random. It wasn't just about 4 girls. This had been going on for years, maybe decades. Maybe longer. The cornfields weren't just a backdrop. They were the stage. The origin. The sanctuary. And whoever had built that shrine wasn't finished. They called it a children's story. Something to tell at sleepovers and bonfires. A tale told between mouthfuls of candy corn and pumpkin pie. Nothing more than folklore. A warning to stay out of the fields after dark. But in Harlow, Nebraska, every myth starts as a memory. And the memory of the Corn King was older than anyone cared to admit. Whispers said he lived in the soil, beneath the roots, beneath the bones. That he fed on the forgotten. On those lost between rows. He had no face. No voice. Just the rustle of stalks and the feeling of being watched. The legend varied by household. In one version, he was a demon bound by ancient farmers who made a deal to guarantee their crops would never fail. In another, he was a god abandoned by settlers who plowed his sacred land. But in all of them, he needed tribute. A harvest of flesh. A sowing of fear. Agent Mara Lark had no time for fairy tales. But she paid attention when patterns emerged. And the pattern she found led her out of Nebraska, to a dusty archive in Kansas. In 1978, 5 women disappeared across Ellis County. Their bodies, those that were found, had been buried in fields. Corn placed near their heads. Mouths sewn shut. Eyes removed. Hands missing. No one connected the dots then. But Lark did. She laid the photos side by side with her current victims. Same methods. Same silence. Same ritualistic care in how they were left, like the killer wasn't hiding them. He was planting them. She dug deeper. Found the name Josiah Brandt, a hired hand on one of the farms where a body was discovered. Quiet. Reclusive. Known for talking to himself in the fields. Suspected, but never arrested. He died, supposedly, in a fire that consumed a barn just 2 days after the last murder. The official report said there were partial remains. Ashes. A molar. Some blood. But no one had ever confirmed the body. No DNA. No autopsy. Just a name buried with a headstone, and a case closed in ink that hadn't even dried. Lark didn't believe in ghosts. But she believed in men who wanted to become them. So she searched for any trace of Josiah Brandt. No records. No children. No marriage. Nothing. Until 10 years ago. A property sale. Land on the edge of Harlow's farthest eastern fields. Nearly 30 acres. Purchased in cash under the name, John Brandt. The address bordered all 4 of the known crime scenes. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a hunting ground. Lark drove there alone. It wasn't even marked on maps. No mailbox. No fence. Just a gravel path choked with weeds that led to a rusted trailer sitting like a roach in the shadows of the corn. She stepped out, gun holstered, heart steady. The door to the trailer hung slightly ajar. Inside, she found rot. Newspapers stacked to the ceiling. Jars of what looked like teeth. Fish hooks. Rusted pliers. And pinned to the back wall, a mural of corn. Black ink drawings, some frantic and childlike, others almost surgical in detail. Faces drawn into the stalks. Names scratched into the margins. She found one name again and again, Josiah. And beneath it, scratched deeper than the rest. We are not one. Lark backed out slowly, snapped photos, and called for backup. They never made it. Because that same night, someone screamed from the fields. Not the scream of someone dying, but someone surviving. The girl's name was Lydia Bell. She was 19. A recent hire at Benny's, working Clara's old shifts. She'd gone missing 3 days earlier. They found her in a silo 6 miles from the others. Bound at the wrists. Gagged. Bruised. Starved. Surrounded by corn dolls arranged in a circle. Some of the dolls were new. Others, rotted. Mold-covered. Decades old. Someone had been building this shrine for years. Lydia barely clung to consciousness. Lark leaned down beside her, brushing hair from her eyes. "You're safe now," she whispered. But Lydia's eyes rolled back. Her lips cracked open. And with the last breath she had before passing out, she rasped a single word. Brothers. That one word shifted everything. Lark had thought she was chasing a man. Now she realized, there was more than one. It wasn't just Josiah Brandt. It was a lineage. She reviewed the files again. Birth records. Census logs. Scoured every Brandt family mentioned in the Midwest going back a century. And she found them. Twins. Born in 1951. Josiah and Ezekiel Brandt. One listed as dying in the barn fire. The other? Officially disappeared in 1972. No death certificate. No trace. But property records revealed something stranger. The original Brandt farm in Kansas had been sold off piece by piece, except for one corner of it, signed over to a religious group that no longer existed. The Church of the Last Sheaf. A fringe cult that believed in agricultural sacrifice, worship of the Harvest Father, and rituals involving corn, binding, and silence. Lark's mouth went dry. It wasn't just about Harlow. It was about what came before Harlow. The land. The blood on it. And those who vowed to keep feeding it. That night, she returned to the trailer with a full tactical team. But the trailer was empty. Gutted. Burned from the inside. Only one thing remained intact, a Polaroid pinned to the wall with a corncob skewer. It showed Lark. Standing in the fields. The photo had been taken just days ago. Beneath it, written in a smear of what looked like blood. Last seed. Last supper. We come together. And below that, one final line. July 20th. She will kneel. 4 days left. And now Lark knew, this wasn't a case. It was a harvest. Mara Lark had always believed monsters wore human faces. But she was wrong. Sometimes, they wore masks made of corn husks, stitched with the hair of the forgotten. After Lydia Bell muttered that one chilling word, brothers, Lark's path became razor clear. This wasn't the work of a lone killer or a single deranged man hiding in cornfields. It was a system, buried like a taproot in the soil beneath Harlow. A network. A legacy. She sat alone in the library archive for 16 hours straight. Coffee cold. Eyes dry. Documents scattered like dead leaves. Old land deeds showed a pattern. Dozens of farms in and around Harlow had been bought, sold, and handed down over the past century, all between a familiar set of surnames. Brandt. Wilkes. Grahn. Toller. Families no one had thought to question. But Lark questioned them. She matched these names to birth records, obituaries, property transfers, church rolls, even tax filings from defunct agrarian fellowships. And in the dust of forgotten microfilm, she uncovered what she feared most. The Brothers of the Husk. They had been born from dust and desperation. Founded in 1913 by Josiah Brandt, the sect was rooted in warped agrarian folklore, tales twisted into ritual. They believed the land had a spirit, a hunger that could only be fed by human life. To sow the body is to feed the earth, one journal entry read. To silence the mouth is to let the soil speak. The early years were masked by coincidence, accidental deaths, disappearances blamed on roaming vagrants or mental illness. But each planting coincided with miraculous crop yields, unseasonal growth, and record harvests. It was enough to earn them converts. The cult grew small, secretive. Men raised sons, passed on the rites, taught them to bind, to sow, to sacrifice. They disappeared from public view but never left. They became the land. They became the farmers. The man at table 6. Just a servant. One of many. Lark understood then, the diner was a feeding trough. A marketplace of bodies. They watched. They waited. They chose. And now, the date circled in red on the calendar was here, July 20th. Final harvest. She called in a tactical team. Coordinated a three-pronged raid with FBI and state agents under cover of night. 3 properties. 3 suspected safehouses used by known associates of the Brandt lineage. The operation began at 1 a.m. By dawn, they had cracked open hell. Property 1, a sprawling barn outside Wilkes Hollow. Agents broke the lock and swept inside, rifles drawn. What they found froze them in place. 8 women, alive but barely. Drugged. Shackled. Their skin was pale, eyes unfocused, arms dotted with puncture wounds. Some were missing fingernails. Others had corn silk woven into their hair like crowns. They had been fed just enough to survive, but not enough to escape. The floor beneath them was packed with old hay and damp soil. Symbols carved into the wood. Corn husks braided into nooses, hanging like decorations from the rafters. One of the agents, a seasoned veteran of cartel raids, stepped outside and vomited. Property 2, a farmhouse converted into a chapel. From the outside, it looked abandoned. But the door was barred from the inside. A battering ram cleared the way. Inside was a sight pulled straight from Nightmare. An entire room reconfigured into a makeshift sanctuary, walls draped with black corn stalks. Pews made of old crates. Skulls lined the altar. 12 masked men knelt in unison, their heads bowed in prayer. Each wore robes stitched from burlap, each mask carved from dried husk, sealed with resin and blood. One man stood at the pulpit. In his hand, a ceremonial blade. Rusted. Ritualistic. At his feet, a girl no older than 17, unconscious and draped in linen. He raised the knife. He never brought it down. Lark herself was the one who fired the shot. 1 round to the shoulder. The man screamed and collapsed. The others didn't move. They simply stayed kneeling, chanting in a low, guttural drone. It took 6 agents to detain them. None of them resisted. None of them spoke. They simply smiled, as if they'd been waiting to be caught. As if this, too, was part of the plan. Property 3, the most remote. A wooded plot miles from paved road, bordering the northern corn belt. No house. No structure. Just a rusted silo, the one Lark had found days earlier, now burned to its foundation. And inside the earth, a shallow grave, freshly dug, but empty. The grave had a name carved into a plank of cedar. Mara. But the worst discovery of the night wasn't in the chapel. It was in the footage. One of the agents recovered an old VHS tape from a shrine inside the first barn. Lark played it in private, knowing it would be bad. It was worse. The tape showed John Brandt, face half in shadow, kneeling in a cornfield. He was speaking to the camera. The harvest is begun. The soil has been fed. The husk will bloom, and from it, we shall rise. He looked up. Right into the lens. Right at her. Mara, he whispered. Your roots are deeper than you know. Come home. Then static. John Brandt, whoever he really was, had vanished. Gone before the raids. No trail. No prints. Just his disciples, still smiling in interrogation rooms. Still chanting that same word over and over again. Feed. And somewhere out there, the true harvest had only just begun. Time passed. Not quickly. Not cleanly. In the public eye, the case of the Brothers of the Husk was over. Closed. Contained. Buried like rotting stalks after the frost. The headlines faded. Cult dismantled in Nebraska, dozens rescued. FBI hero Agent Lark commended. Dark harvest ends in justice. But the land didn't care about headlines. And neither did Agent Mara Lark. She stayed in Nebraska until the last report was filed. Oversaw the seizures. Spoke at the survivors' relocation hearings. Gave statements to news outlets, smiling for cameras that couldn't see how tired her eyes had become. The truth, she knew, was not in the files. Because truth didn't come in ink and tape. It came in whispers, low, rustling, living in the silence between answers. And those whispers never stopped. She tried to return to normal. Moved back to Denver. Repainted her walls. Got a dog. Took therapy seriously. Her therapist said she had PTSD. Nightmares. Hallucinations. Residual trauma. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why, some nights, Mara would wake up with the faint smell of soil under her nails. The sound of corn brushing against glass, even though her windows were shut. She checked. Always checked. Nothing. Until 6 months later. It was a Thursday. Cold, flat winter air. Snow not yet fallen, but close. Lark had just returned from a grocery run. Tossed her keys in the bowl by the door. The dog didn't bark. Just stared, ears back, eyes pinned to the hallway, tail stiff as bone. Then came the knock. No footsteps. No doorbell. Just a single knock, like someone pressing a finger against her spine from inside her bones. She opened the door. No one there. Just a package. Wrapped in brown paper. No label. No return address. No postmark. Inside, a single Polaroid photograph. Her heart stopped. It was her bedroom. The photo showed Mara asleep. In her bed. That exact bed. The same sheets. Same pillow. Just taken from an angle that suggested someone had stood less than 2 feet from her. But that wasn't the worst part. On the nightstand, next to her head, sat an ear of corn. Pale yellow. Fresh. Damp with morning dew. It hadn't been there when she went to sleep. And it wasn't there now. She flipped the photo over. One line. Written in red ink. Not pen. Not marker. Just, red. You cannot kill the roots. Mara tore through the apartment. Checked every door. Every window. Every lock. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No cameras catching a face. The corn? Gone. She ran the photo through Bureau Labs. No prints. No DNA. No traceable materials. Just clean terror. The analyst looked at her with confusion. You sure this isn't a prank? She said nothing. Because how do you explain the wind? That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. The Polaroid burned a hole on her desk. And outside, in the darkness beyond the suburban streets and porch lights, something moved. It wasn't a shape. Not quite. It was the feeling of movement. Of something sliding between blades of grass. Of soil shifting in its sleep. Of roots curling toward home. And then, faint, so faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it, came the sound of corn stalks swaying. No wind. No storm. Just whispers. The same ones she'd heard in the fields outside Harlow. The same ones that came before the disappearances began. She closed her eyes. But the whispers only grew louder. Because some seeds don't die. They wait.